Randall McGendry, and I'm happy to welcome you back to a Global Hope discussion group. And we look at issues that are local in passion and interest, and we do our best to look at them globally so that we see how they connect to other issues. And our main focus in doing this program is to see what underlies our common concerns as a community. So if you can put your head into that game, you'll be with us in our intention to bring some degree of enlightenment to difficult issues, sometimes controversial ones, but we invite you to be part of our audience and part of our community. So I would like for people to introduce themselves and let you know that the last time we got together, we were focusing primarily on issues regarding cannabis. Now, this is a kind of show that opens up into new topics and new areas, but we do have some focal points. So today's show will start where we left off last time, and that can then blossom into other concerns. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Corey French. I'm a student here at UH-Hilo.
Robert Patrici. I'm with Friends for Justice, and I'm one of the people arrested for marijuana in Hawaii.
I'm Matthew Rifkin, part of the Peaceful Sky Alliance and also Americans for Safe Access, which is a medical cannabis advocacy group.
My name is Jennifer Ruggles. I'm an HCC alumni and community member.
My name is Daniel Bont. Thank you for having me. I'm a medical marijuana patient, local resident, and a student of UH-Hilo.
I'm Saul Ross, and I'm a student of HCC, and what they used to call a concerned citizen.
And I'm Corey Harden, a community member.
So our topic of today would be marijuana, and we'll just start off on that. Does anybody have anything to say? Start it off.
Sure.
I guess I would say the thing I noticed that came out yesterday was the interviews with the various candidates running for the state house. And there was a question on cannabis there about whether they supported it or not, or what degree. And seeing some of the old tried and true myths, one of the candidates, two candidates, talked about, again, marijuana being a gateway to harder drugs. And so I think the politicians continue to need to be educated in more current issues related to cannabis, and gateway theory is not one of them.
The gubernatorial election is of great importance to our collective concerns, particularly with House Bill 2675, which the governor vetoed, non-illegal vetoed in 2008, I think it was. And that it was majority passed by the House only to meet her veto. That means that it will be brought up again, and the veto will be resting in the hands of the governor. So I would be interested if anybody has heard of their stance on that House bill.
So what is the bill?
What's the bill? It was put forth by Joe Burtman, and it was addressing the ambiguity in the way in which the law is currently stated regarding medical marijuana users.
There's actually a number of bills have been brought forward with Americans for Safe Access, Peaceful Sky, Friends for Justice, Drug Policy Forum, and they've done pretty well. But what happens is that the prosecutors and the police chiefs band together, and they have backroom meetings, and they've basically been able to keep those bills from being heard.
So is our real discussion more about what can we do type of thing, is it more of is it wrong, is it actually harmful, or that we acknowledge that marijuana, no, that the prohibition of marijuana is harmful.
Prohibition of marijuana is harmful, yeah. I believe that's
so we
true.
can, now it's more of a question of what can we do, or how do we go about doing so.
Well, we've had prohibition of cannabis since the 1930s, I believe, and the war on marijuana started with Richard Nixon, So you have over 30 years of the war on marijuana. So what are the results? If you look at the results of what has happened, what have they accomplished? And what they've accomplished is we have the highest incarceration rates in the world. I think we have 5% of the world's population with 25% of the world's prisoners in prisons. We have overcrowding. And you take a lot of these nonviolent offenders, 80% or 85% of the people arrested for marijuana in the United States are arrested for possession of marijuana. And so you have somebody like Barack Obama who has said that he smoked marijuana and he wasn't arrested and he went on to be president. You have somebody else that was a student in college that smoked marijuana, was arrested and went to prison and didn't go on to be president. In fact, became an economic liability for society because then he's not employable, etc. As opposed to, so what have we cost the country by doing this?
Yes, I agree completely with that. My point is, how do we move forward now?
Well,
What's the
California just introduced, well, it was not introduced, reintroduced a bill called Proposition 19. I don't know if anybody has heard of this, but it's to legalize marijuana on the local governments, not on the federal level, and allows local governments to tax and regulate, which is pretty interesting. And that's something that maybe we can work on as a community, maybe something that we can adopt if it goes well.
Seems to me that marijuana is a gateway drug in one respect, and that is that the legalization of it may well open the gates to the legalization of other drugs. And it's very easy for us to say now, well, marijuana should be illegal, but heroin absolutely not. But the fact of the matter is that we all know that there are chemists working in labs all around the world right now, playing around with various molecular structures of various narcotic drugs and coming up with variations on a theme. And so my question, I suppose, to those who advocate marijuana legalization is, what do you then say to those people, chemists, users, advocates of other drugs who then want their particular recreation legalized?
I don't think that marijuana is the same as those drugs. Those are manufactured drugs. Marijuana is grown. It's a natural plant.
Well, so is opium.
Well, an opium is... opium may have a use, actually. I don't know.
I would argue that
Well, I know that there are theories that drug prohibition of any kind is, in fact, very harmful.
that's the point I was after.
To who?
Well, in the prohibition of alcohol, we saw the rise of really great American gangsters such as Al Capone, plus the consumption of alcohol. I don't have the figure in front of me, but it went up like 17 to 28%.
Well, also, it was unregulated.
They didn't have the desired effect that they.
Well, you had bathtub gin. Alcohol wasn't regulated, and so you had wood alcohol. You had people dying from alcohol poisoning and regulation.
So is the argument that if it's legalized, the consumption of marijuana will go down?
That's what's happened in other places, in particular. Well, actually, if you're talking about in the general population in the Netherlands, when they pretty much decriminalized marijuana, and the use rates among adults are basically the same. They didn't fluctuate. They didn't go up. They didn't go down. No, for adolescents now. But for adolescents, they have half the adolescent use that we have here in Hawaii. So through regulation, they were able to reduce children using or preteen children or teenagers using marijuana by 50%. They have 50% less than what we have through regulation.
Well, it seems to me that every argument that you make in favor of legalizing marijuana can be made in favor of legalizing any drug. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing,
I'm in
but
favor of legalizing every drug. I'm in very,
favor of legalizing all
It's better to tax it to regulate than it is to allow the black market to take control.
all it's doing. Everybody's gonna keep doing drugs, no matter, as long as there are drugs on the planet, people are gonna do it. Making it legal, it does not help anything.
And it's safer for the citizens to have a place to buy them safely and know exactly what they're getting than trying to get it off somebody on the corner.
It's common knowledge a kid can get a sack of weed way easier than they could get a 12-pack of Bud Light. It's common knowledge. Prove me wrong. As any
depending on where you live, I assume. But yeah.
And I think the important thing too is that again, everyone hears the word legalize or legalize everything, and the way that law enforcement against prohibition, which their phrase is legalize all drugs, and the first thing people hear that is that, oh, you mean you want to legalize meth and heroin the same way as cannabis? And the answer is they want to legalize everything. That doesn't mean you regulate every drug the same way. In other words, certain drugs for painkillers, you can buy ibuprofen over the counter, but OxyContin is a certain type of prescription. Control-release morphine is even more difficult, or Dilaudid pills and whatever, right? So in the same way that all drugs should be legalized, they would be regulated differently. So access to heroin wouldn't be the same way as going to a store to pick up a six-pack of beer, a pack of cigarettes, or at some point a pack of cannabis, right? So you do want to try to legalize, and part of the harm or the issue about prohibition in terms of like heroin is, of course, because it's illegal, the addicts are forced to go into lives of thieves, crime, prostitution, there's street violence, there's all sorts of really harsh realities to that. Whereas if you look at a place like Switzerland where they have legalized heroin for addicts, the addicts go to a sterile place, they get their purity, everything, they know what it is, and most of them use less over time. They don't go up to their maximum allowed amount of heroin per day because they're actually trying to get off it. The problems they have is when they have to steal for it or get purity levels they don't understand that causes problems. So in fact, even legal heroin actually has, in a certain way, if you regulate it right, you're actually helping those people.
We can look at tobacco to see, okay, so what happened in tobacco? With tobacco, which is a very dangerous, addictive drug, that's a legal drug, we've actually reduced tobacco use by 50% through education and treatment, or just talking about it and talking about what happens to people, and didn't have to arrest anybody to do that. And during that same period of time, illegal drug use has risen. So has marijuana use. So you have a legal drug, tobacco, which is highly addictive. You've been able to reduce use by 50% through regulation, by education. And I think the amount of resources, they spent $1 trillion on the drug war since they started the drug war. If you just say cannabis, I don't know, I can't talk about other drugs as much because I don't really know that much about other drugs. I do know a lot about cannabis. The amount of income that you could generate from cannabis would be substantial. You could reduce hundreds of billions of dollars in costs, plus the tax revenue, all that money that's going to drug cartels, that's in the black market, now comes into education, now comes into treatment. It just makes sense. I mean, we've been doing this. How long are we going to continue to do the same thing that nobody will stand up and tell you that this drug war is a success? Even the police will tell you the drug war is a failure. It's a failure. It has not worked.
Can we just be blunt? It's about funding. It's about who's getting the money to take down drug users. Who is getting paid to do that? Who is getting paid? They're not going to want to stop getting paid for that. That's what everything comes down to. I'm sure even the illegalization of heroin comes from poppy seeds. I'm sure that has stuff to do. That is definitely, in my opinion, attached to the Afghanistan war.
Right. So who's making money off this?
Who's making money off this? That's who, and that's an issue of transparency. Yeah. That's a big issue.
Could it possibly be the prison complex system?
Well, I think Ethan Nadelman from Drug Policy Alliance makes the argument that we should be the ones buying Afghani heroin. Right? We should be paying the farmers instead of the Taliban, because we need the opium to be making the morphines and so forth that we have. Better that we should control it, because it is something that they do very well. Their climate, whatever, they've been doing it for centuries. We should buy it, keep it out of the Taliban's hand. We need the stuff anyway.
Well, I think, in all honesty, I think you do yourselves a disservice by suggesting that those people who don't want drugs legalized don't want because they want to see more money in their pockets, and that it's somehow a financial conspiracy to reward police officers or prison builders. I think that's nonsense. I don't think that's in any way, shape, or form true. I think that there are legitimate concerns, and I think that it's better to address the legitimate concerns than to come up with conspiracy theories. I don't think that you do your cause a service.
Well,
I think it makes other people on the other side of the coin look at you askance and say, what on earth is this? What drugs have done to them? They've turned them paranoid.
Well, we can't really dance around the issue. One of the fastest growing industries in the United States, we've shipped all of our industries overseas. Manufacturing everything, but we do have a very fast growing industry, private prisons. So why, and who owns these private prisons? Halliburton, Dick Cheney, those same people. So I don't think it's a conspiracy theory when it's a fact.
Well, but in that case, you've got to put the judges in the same. The judges are in it because they presumably their $100,000 a year salaries are in jeopardy if they don't put people in jail for drugs. I think it's a red herring, and I think I actually agree with you. I actually do think drugs should be legalized. I think all drugs should be legalized, but I think that you do the cause a disservice by arguing from a paranoid stance. I don't think that you have logic behind you. And it doesn't make any sense to me.
We have a comment from the audience.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure that I stayed with this question here, but by having these drugs illegal to start with makes them worth something because of the tremendous risk involved. But to say that there's no conspiracy when every local government budgets its assets every year for confiscating citizens' property, and then the police go out and get it, and they get 1/4 of it. The county prosecutor gets 1/4 of it, and the state gets 1/2. This is a business for corruption.
And where's the transparency? That's what it comes down to.
And where did
why are we questioning it in the beginning?
Well, those problems really come back to the ambiguity of the law, the way it's stated now, especially I'm speaking as a medical cannabis user. But the laws in which they have stated plants must come from somewhere, seeds must come from somewhere. Growing at residences is an obvious increase in the threat of crime, yet nothing has changed. Every time somebody tries to put something through, it either gets vetoed or shot down by the House. So there needs to be a consensus in general. Whatever it is, it needs to be a unified voice instead of people yelling from different sides of the room, in my opinion.
Talk about legalization a little. Alcohol is legal. I saw a statistic recently about the number of car accidents, and some tremendous number of accidents on this island. I think it was 50% are alcohol related. So that's something that is legal, and that doesn't seem like it's working out real well. I'm not saying restrict everything, but that's an example of what happens with legalization.
Well, look at what happened during Prohibition. You think it's better now, and you got to look at the whole picture. I understand what you're saying, and that's where education, I think, comes in. But the whole picture, you had Al Capone, you had people shooting each other constantly, the rise of organized crime. A lot of that was through alcohol prohibition. And so through regulation, I think a lot of that is better. They could do a better job through education, is what I think.
To your comment about the economic related to the prohibition and stuff, I mean, one of the things that happens in New York is what the cops call collars for cash. And it's been really documented. Blacks and Hispanic males between the ages of 18 and 26 are arrested at 7 times the rate for whites in New York City for cannabis possession. And what happens is the cops, oftentimes rookie cops who are late in their shift, will go to a bodega, wait for someone to come out a block away, and basically say to them, okay, we know what you did in there, and if you show us what you have, maybe everything checks out, we'll let you go. In New York, marijuana is decriminalized if it's in personal possession or private use kind of thing. The minute the kid pulls out of his pocket his little dime bag, now it's in plain view. Now he gets arrested. So the cop then arrests the guy, takes him to the station house. Again, it's been late in his shift. Why? So he gets overtime. His paperwork processing goes, his desk sergeant gets paid. They get money for extra overtime. The kid, black, Hispanic, will be put in the Tombs overnight. That's a New York, holding cell prison overnight. He gets his public defender. The next day he bleeds out or whatever, and off you go. So there's a huge incentive for these people. And we also do it as a way of tracking people. Now all of a sudden you're fingerprinting and DNA sampling and getting a whole large database full of new people that you can keep track of.
I think that we all agree that more lives are destroyed over the drug war than drunk driving, possibly. I mean, the war in Mexico, the war on our people here in the United States. Yeah, I feel like that's more of a bottom line. We have a question in the audience.
I would just like the panel to discuss the case of Roger Christie. He's been in prison how long now, and I think they're refusing to allow him out on bail.
It's very true. I think we have some experts here on that. Does anybody know about Dream 14?
Other than, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it is. I don't have a lot of details in terms of, other than he is, of course, being held without bail and is listed as a threat to the community. Yeah, I mean, I think it poses a series of interesting problems and situations. In some ways, I guess would want to argue that he was the lowest law enforcement priority for the police for 4 years. The local cops let him do his thing down front without any interruption. But it'll be an interesting case. I think, you know, it's going to, I don't know, it's a tricky one. I think the religious defense will be interested to see how it plays out if he gets to use it, if it gets that far.
I wonder how much it costs. There were 13 agencies involved in a 2-year investigation. They actually flew a C-130 plane here, especially to fly these guys to Honolulu. And if they knew he was breaking the law, if they wanted to arrest him, why didn't they just arrest him? Why did they wait 2 years? And they actually sent informants and people in there to try to get him to grow. Like, we have all this money. We want you to, want to do this huge thing with clones. And so they were actually trying to egg him on and to build this into a RICO case or whatever. It's amazing to me that we have people I read about all the time, road rage, assaults, rapes, murders, and those people are all getting bail. And Roger Christie, again, I said this last time, he's not a threat to the community. He's a threat to the government. Roger Christie is a threat to the marijuana laws, I believe, because he is so successful. It's interesting, there's a petition online right now to free Roger Christie. It's been on for 4 days, and there's signatures from all over the world. I was reading it the other day. Portugal, Puerto Rico, Germany, Canada, and some other countries, and all across the United States. I mean, he's an internationally known figure.
What's the website?
Change.org. You can go in there and type in Free Roger Christie.
And there's a petition there. We'd urge you all to sign it and post it onto your web pages, and let's get it out there.
I have a different take on Robert Christie. I agree with you. He's not a threat to anybody except the government, and that it's over-dramatized, what's being taken upon him. But to quote Leon Trotsky, in our eyes, individual acts are inadmissible precisely because they belittle the role of the masses in their own consensus, reconciles them to powerlessness, and turns their eyes and hopes towards a great avenger or liberator who will someday come and accomplish his mission. It doesn't do our collective consensus good. It increases the authority of the local cops. It allows them to expand their, Robert Christie did this, he might be involved. Now they can go out and fly a little heavier. They can go and pull a little more, a warrant or two more than they would.
I think that's a temporary phenomenon, and I think you're right about that. But what I see is happening is it's a lightning rod. People are upset about it. It's focusing attention, both sides of the issue. It's bringing a lot of attention to the issue. So now we can finally really discuss it. And that's what really needs to happen is this. They've never been allowed to discuss marijuana legalization. As soon as you start talking, up until now, it's really changing now, but as soon as you start talking about you were a drug dealer, you want to put all the children on drugs, and those are the kind of things that, how dare you even mention that? There's something wrong with you. And really, it hasn't worked. Marijuana prohibition has not worked, so we need to discuss this. What will work? It's not, what's happening now is not working, so what are we going to do about it?
I thought one of the great comments, back to more of the topic of legalization, in Amsterdam, in Holland rather, the feeling is because of the drug, is that cannabis is boring. It's not this rebellion. It's not something a youth responsible person is going to do as a way of challenging their parents because it's legal. It's no different than wait until you're 21 to get a beer.
All too often is a kid that his parents tell him not to do it, and
That's the first thing they're going to do.
So, what ideas do people have for legalization? Do you see the government controlling it? Do you see private businesses running it? How would that work? I mean, I hear a lot of people don't like what's happening.
That's the
So
funny
what's
thing with marijuana is you can throw a seed in your backyard and you can grow it yourself. You know exactly what's in it. You know exactly how much you have, or you know exactly what you have. It's one of the only things, really, unless you brew your own beer, I guess, it's another. But even if you brew your own beer, I mean, you're still going through some kind of chemical process. But marijuana, you can just grow it yourself. I think once they legalize it, people are not going to be afraid to grow it. It's a beautiful plant. You ever seen one in real life?
We have a question from the audience.
The question was brought up on regulation. Regulation by who? Government? I mean, I'm curious to know, do you guys think that if anything the government regulates it really works?
That's a good
Really?
question.
Well, I think you could argue that if had the government regulated the banking system a little bit more carefully, we wouldn't be in the crisis really. But I think societies, and I think particularly from my 15 years observation of being here, American society, or the American establishment distrusts two things primarily, and they distrust illegal acts as a form of protest. It smacks at the foundation of stability. And when someone like Mr. Christie stands up and says, I am going to defy the law to make my political point, it puts them in a very precarious and difficult position. I'm not convinced that the prosecutor's office in the county of Hawaii is increasing their workload exponentially because of some mythical money they're getting from somewhere. I don't buy that argument at all.
So why did they?
I think that you know, they are, as I said this last week, if it's an illegal act, and if somebody stands up and says, I am in your face, I am breaking the law, they have very little choice but to turn around and arrest him. Why he didn't get bail, I don't know.
We saw that with Rosa Parks. Same thing. When it was legal to own a black man, and you know, it was illegal for women to vote. We're not supposed to, you know, how do you get those things changed? 20 million Americans have gone to prison. Countless college students have had their lives destroyed because they were arrested for marijuana. Being arrested for marijuana is far worse than using marijuana. And so you know, what are we going to do about it? I think Roger Christie, it's a necessary part of the process. It's part of what we got to do. I mean, we have to change this. It has to change. And Roger Christie has done a lot to do it.
It's been really good discussion. Thank you all for joining us, joining Global Hope, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Great.
You guys were
First people